distinguished members of the Legislative Correspondents Association who join us each week to discuss the most recent political headlines. Casey Seiler is the state editor of the Albany Times-Union. Rick Carlin is a political reporter for that paper, and Ken Lovett is the Capitol Bureau Chief for the New York Daily News. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
You bet.
So despite the 13 ethics violations that Congressman Charlie Rangel is facing or has been charged with, he made it very clear this week during an epic speech on the House floor that he is not going anywhere. And during his birthday party this week, and with all of the support that he got, it seems that, you know, he's not going anywhere for a while.
Not tomorrow.
So will this, I wanted to sort of talk about the issue of, for a lot of these political leaders, in going to his birthday party, how will this affect them, if any?
Well, you know, it turned into a big nothing in terms of that whole will they show. In the end, most of the Democratic establishment, especially the major ones, showed. Andrew Cuomo is the big one because Andrew Cuomo is running for governor on an ethics reform platform. He's going to clean up Albany. And in the end, they decided to take the hit short term that, you know, that he went to this party with Rangel in favor of not alienating the minority, particularly the African-American community. Charles Rangel is still very popular in Harlem and among African-American leaders. And Cuomo, who has been taking heat since he started his campaign for not really having an urban agenda outlined yet, for not really hiring a lot of minority people for the campaign. So I think he felt this was not a battle he wanted to fight with the African-American community.
There's also a real distinction in Congress between, it's clear to me, the New York delegation and the rest of the Congress throughout the United States, where people in other states are running away from Charlie Rangel as fast as they can. In New York, well, different story. Once again, New York is a little bit unique in that regard.
Yeah, and to Ken's point, there are a lot of especially old guard African-American politicians, Democratic politicians in the state, who have really felt quite left behind by the whole new Democratic Party. We also saw the signs hanging up all over the state convention back in late May. A lot of those people are going to cut Cuomo a little bit more slack. He's got plenty of slack on his own as is. By making this gesture, it buys him a couple more weeks to work on his urban agenda and to shore up kind of that side of his...
The next day, you know, the Republicans, not unexpectedly attacked him for going and saying, how can you expect him to clean up Albany? But that same day, Andrew Cuomo, who has $1 billion in the bank, $25 million in the bank, put up an ad on ethics reform. So he looked to at least mute some of the criticism by putting out an ad of his own on ethics reform.
And really, Cuomo, he doesn't have a lot to lose by going to this event. He's so far ahead in the polls over Rick Lazio or Carl Palladino that he'd have to make a major, massive blunder to really worry about anything at this point. So why not score some points with the urban part of the electorate?
And Rick, you said there's a difference between the New York congressional delegation and Democrats nationally.
Well, there's concern nationally
but upstate,
sure.
Some upstate Democrats, at least one in particular, Mike Arcuri, has asked for Rangel to step down. Meanwhile, I believe
McMahon from Staten Island didn't go.
So what should other Democrats do? What do you see them doing over the next few weeks?
I think it really depends on their district and the makeup of their district. If it's a solid blue district, more liberal district with substantial number of minority voters, they don't really have to even address the issue.
So it's more of an issue for upstate?
Upstate, conservative, white areas maybe.
And what was
they're under pressure to denounce Rangel.
And certainly what was interesting, that was Chuck Schumer and Andrew Cuomo both waited until really the last minute to say that they were attending. And you say, well, why would they do that? A, they really were thinking about it, but also, on top of that, they avoided days and days and days of intense criticism, because by doing it at the end, you'd get a day or two on it, as opposed to announcing a week before, I'll be at the party, and then the Republicans would have been banging them every day on it.
And is there also an issue of loyalty? I mean, Charles Rangel has been there for a lot of these politicians, and by them turning their back, doesn't it kind of make them look bad in terms of friendship?
Clearly for somebody like Kirsten Gillibrand, who really owes quite a lot to Rangel, both in terms of fundraising that he's done for her and in terms of support, Rangel's support for Gillibrand, who's upstate, who's white, really gives him or her a certain amount of credibility with that kind of urban voter. So for Gillibrand, Gillibrand was really, I think, the first person among that kind of, people who are really going to, or potentially facing a tough battle this fall. She came out immediately upon the issue of the party being raised and said, "Oh yeah, I'll be there. I'll be there to support." And
Patterson and Bloomberg, but of course they're not running again.
Right.
So it was an easier decision for them.
Let's talk about another race, the race for governor. Carl Palladino is really picking up steam. He's picking up endorsements. This doesn't look good for Lazio. Did anybody expect him to get this far?
Yes.
Yeah?
I remember people telling me at the convention back in June, these were some of the operatives. They were talking to me, sort of in private. They didn't want to be quoted on this, saying they were concerned that Palladino, even then, could win a primary race, that he has so much money, and that Lazio is so weak that he could win the primary. And a lot of the old line New York Republicans are worried about that, because if he does, he's so far to the right, and he's sometimes so over the top that it would scare off some of the mainstream Republican voters for the next election cycle.
But the problem, too, is, Palladino can win because Lazio has fizzled. And what's going on here now is when you get to a primary, turnout's going to be low anyway. And if Lazio isn't drawing the base out because they're just not energized with him, then who's going to come out? The really disgruntled voters. The disgruntled voters. Yeah. And those are the people that Palladino is catering to and catering his message to. So he could very well win this primary.
And you also get a sense among a lot of Republicans that they understand that Cuomo is kind of this juggernaut that's coming down the track at them. And if they're going to lose, better to go out with somebody who's really going to make it kind of a dogfight for Cuomo, and who's going to expend tons of money, perhaps suppressing some of the Democratic vote, and perhaps promoting some of the Republican candidates.
So does Lazio not even have a chance at this point?
It doesn't appear that he has a chance against Cuomo, but against Palladino it could be a horse race.
No, against Palladino, he certainly, look, Lazio does have the bulk of the party establishment. The county chairs, and those are the people who turn people out to vote and things like that. So certainly he could win, but to say that it's a lock for either of them would be wrong. I think it's going to be a horse race. I think it's going to depend on turnout, and if it's a really small turnout based on just disgruntled voters, I think that favors Palladino. If a lot of the Republicans want to argue for the heart and soul of the party, and there's also the fight over whether Palladino's taxpayer line will overtake the conservative line, so there's going to be that battle going on.